Velkommen alle sammen til åpningen av fotoutstillingen WASHinWar her i Nobels fredssenter. Den prisvinnende utstillingen er laget av Caritas Ukraina, Tatjana Jatsluk og Olja Sydi, som vi er så heldige å ha med oss her i dag. Da vi bestemte oss for å presentere denne utstillingen for et norsk publikum, slo det oss at det ikke holder bare å skildre det ukrainerne har gjennomgått som følge av Russlands krig mot vann. Vi må også gjøre nordmenn oppmerksom på vår egen sårbarhet. Vi er så heldige å ha et utmerket panel med norske stemmer som vi snart skal bli kjent med. De vil hjelpe oss med nettopp det. Ivan Fedorov, guvernøren i Zaporizjzja, han måtte dessverre melde avbud, men har i stedet sendt oss et budskap på video, som vi skal få se litt senere. I oktober 2022 så var det klart at Russlands forsøk på å erobre Ukraina ikke ville lykkes som planlagt. Det ble starten på en helt annen type krig. Putins krig mot ukrainsk infrastruktur knyttet til vann og energi. Å ramme en fiendes tilgang på vann er langt fra nytt. Vi har eksempler på det helt tilbake igjen til oldtiden. Vi ser det også i konflikter i vår egen tid. At krigen mot vann får en så sentral strategisk rolle i en krig av denne størrelsesorden med målrettede angrep mot vanninfrastruktur i et så stort omfang som det vi ser nå, og et så stort område over så lang tid, det er nytt. Noen forskere har myntet begrepet ecocide om denne formen for krig. Og for de av oss som har sett konsekvensene av denne typen krigføring på nært hold, så gir dette begrepet mening. Det beskriver de humanitære konsekvensene av en form for krig som er i strid med krigens folkerett, så vel som menneskerettighetene. Det viser imidlertid også til de enorme økologiske konsekvensene av Russlands krig mot vann. Flere dammanlegg er blitt skadet eller fullstendig ødelagt. Det har forårsaket flom, fratatt landbruket vann til irrigasjon, og grunnvannet er mange steder blitt forurenset. Konsekvensene er noen ganger åpenbare og synlige, eksempelvis i form av oversvømte landskap. Andre ganger så er tegnene mer subtile. På besøk i Zaporizjzja i fjor møtte jeg Anton, en internt fordrevet mann fra Donbass. Anton hadde tidligere drevet med honningproduksjon, og Caritas Ukrainas levebrødsprogram gjorde det mulig for Anton å gjenoppta dette arbeidet i Zaporizjzja. Men Anton kunne fortelle at byene produserer stadig mindre honning. Det fulle omfanget av Russlands krig mot vann får vi først oversikt over i årene etter at krigen er slutt. En forklaring på Antons bieproblem er likevel ganske åpenbar. Sprengingen av den massive Kakhovka-demningen forårsaket enorm flom, nedstrøms og sterkt redusert vannstand nord for demningen. At Antons bier sliter med å finne nektar under slike forhold er ikke til å undres over. De økologiske og økonomiske konsekvensene av Russlands krig mot vann i Ukraina kommer til å vedvare i mange år etter at krigen en dag er over. Trolig i flere tiår. Den mest prekære trusselen er likevel den uholdbare situasjonen mangelen på rent vann gir. Det som utgjør for menneskene som ikke kan ta rent vann for gitt. Å sikre rent drikkevann, særlig i frontnære strøk, har vært en av Caritas hovedoppgaver under krigen. Det gjøres gjennom vannleveranser, gjennom å reparere eksisterende vanninfrastruktur som er blitt ødelagt, ved å kjøre flaskevann hjem til gamle og uføre som ikke selv kan hente vann, ved å bore etter nye grunnvannskilder, og ved å sette opp vanntårn og filtreringsanlegg. Lik det vi ser utenfor Nobelsenteret her. Helst bør disse installasjonene være mobile, slik at de også kan flyttes dersom den russiske hæren rykker nærmere. Dette arbeidet har eksistensiell betydning for Ukraina. Man kan ikke leve uten vann. Og uten dette arbeidet ville Putin oppnå det han ønsker, og tømme de områdene han ønsker å erobre for ukrainere. Selv når Russland opplever tilbakeslag på slagmarken. Denne fotoutstillingen fra Caritas Ukraina en god anledning til å illustrere vannets betydning i denne konflikten. Det også en mulighet til å rette søkelys mot alt det gode arbeidet Caritas Ukraina gjør for å bedre vannforsyningene under svært vanskelige forhold. Fotoutstillingen og denne panelsamtalen har som nevnt også et annet formål, å gjøre nordmenn bevisst på trusselen mot vår egen vannsikkerhet. Når man vitne til ødeleggelsene Russlands krig mot vann har forårsaket i Ukraina, blir man forferdet. Man blir også engstelig på Norges vegne. Ukraina et mye større land enn Norge, men her til lands finnes det godt over 3 ganger så mange demninger. De sårbare, ikke bare for luftangrep, men også for sabotasje eller hacking, som kanskje mer realistiske trusler enn bomber og missiler. Vi tar for gitt at vi har rent vann i kranen i Norge. Og vi tar for gitt at vi har ren strøm fra vannkraft. Det ingen selvfølge. Ukraina har lært det på brutalt vis, og vi må lære av Ukraina. Dette skal vi høre mer om i dag. Kanskje blir vi skremt, forhåpentligvis blir vi litt klokere, og kanskje kan dette og andre bevisstgjøringstiltak av denne typen bidra til at vi også blir litt tryggere. Takk til alle som har funnet veien hit i dag. Takk til våre gode panelister. Takk til Scanwater for å stille med filtreringsanlegget som står utenfor. Og takk til alle som følger arrangementet på nett. Da snurrer vi film.
Hva gjør vi uten vann? Tar vi vannet vårt egentlig for gitt? 90% av strømmen i landet vårt kommer fra demninger som den dere ser bak meg. Vi i Caritas har siden 2022 jobbet i Øst-Ukraina sammen med våre partnere i frontnære områder for å sikre god vannforsyning.
You should turn off the geolocation in here because it's dangerous to keep your phones on.
Der får vi en brutal påminnelse om hvor viktig vann er. For sykehus, for hjem, for barnehager, for lokalsamfunnet. Vann er forutsetningen for alt. Og når vannet forsvinner, ja, da tvinges folk på flukt. Russlands ødeleggelse av infrastrukturen er enorm, og Russland forstår vannets betydning.
The goal of Russia is to break normal life, electricity, water and heating. This winter we felt it very strongly. It was the coldest winter in recent years. Hundreds of thousands of the people had no electricity. There were also risks for the water supply, heating and hospitals. There were days when attacks on energy substation happened every 4 minutes. But the system survived. We survived. This is the result of early distributed energy. Cogeneration units, the backup power for critical infrastructure. The most important thing is to do it in advance. In words, the approach react after doesn't work. We must to be ready for any scenario. That is why autonomy is so important. Power source, alternative water supply and independent work of hospital and critical facilities. We must analyze the experience and continue to improve resilience plans, because this work gives result in critical moment.
Norsk beredskap forutsetter desentralisert kraftproduksjon over 1000 store og små vannkraftverk over hele landet. Våren 2025 ble et lite damanlegg i Bremanger hacket. En østeuropeisk gruppe har tatt ansvar, men saken er henlagt til PST. Kanskje var målet norsk tungindustri, men det var det lille damanlegget i Bremanger som ble offeret.
Da begynte det med at vi fikk en alarm i vårt driftsovervåkningssystem, som overvåker alle system som vi har. Der fikk vi en alarm at det var veldig unormale verdier på målerenner som går her. For da var det noen som hadde publisert en skrytevideo at de hadde tatt kontroll over installasjonen her, og kunne da styre og hadde da en uautorisert tilgang. De var jo inne her i ganske mange timer, uten at vi var klar over det selv. Og så ble jo den porten som stod åpen her lokalisert, og da kunne han fysisk gå inn og stenge det. Denne type kontroll kan du få via andre systemer også, som vi har hatt en grundig gjennomgang på nå. Men det er alltid fra støvsugere som går på gulvene. Hvis du installerer en høyttaler, så kommer du inn på høyttaleren, og høyttaleren er tilkoblet wifi-nettet som du har da enten på kontoret eller hjemme for den del.
I forhold til konsekvenser for hva som kunne ha skjedd, hva tenker du rundt det?
Det akkurat det. Vi så jo ikke for oss at dette skulle skje oss. Det hadde ikke forventet i hele tatt. Det som kan være en av årsakene til at de har lokalisert seg her området og drevet banker på døra og fant den døra vår, og så var åpen dessverre. Det er stor kraftproduksjon lokalt, som har jo mye mer vann enn hva vi har. Hadde det vært beredskapsmessig nedtapping her, så ville det økt den med kanskje 10 ganger. Så hvis det hadde oppholdt seg folk rundt elva, fisking, bading, slike ting, så ville det gått på sikkerheten på personen.
Dere er jo en mindre organisasjon, og gitt trusselbildet. Hva slags støtte har dere fått i ettertid? Har dere fått støtte?
I mange kommuner så har ikke det vært noe samarbeid med noen. Men det å ha kunnskapsheving rundt det, og det kan skje oss, det kan skje hvem som helst, hvis du har et lite smutthull. Så det at vi må gjøre det forsvaret hele tiden, hver dag. Vannkilder som i drikkevann, kraftbiten, er veldig sårbar. Skal vannbehandlingen på drikkevannsverket fungere? Skal kraftverket fungere, så er du avhengig av at dataen fungerer som den skal. Hvis du stopper et vannverk, og du stopper vannforsyningen til titalls, hundretalls av tusener personer, så vil det være kjempekritisk.
En institusjon som derfor er spesielt sårbar, er Oslo universitetssykehus.
Oslo universitetssykehus hadde ved akutt brudd på vanntilførselen måttet stenge virksomheten. Vi hadde jo uansett måttet klare oss en time eller så, du blir jo ikke kvitt alle menneskene og sånn. Sånn at det er jo spørsmål om man da hadde bedt om å få 10 tankbiler med rent vann i løpet av en time eller 2, mens man gjorde det alt det andre. Uten vann, intet sykehus, kan man bare si. Det er jo sånn.
Hva hadde skjedd hvis vannet hadde forsvunnet her på Oslo universitetssykehus?
Det er en vanskelig situasjon å forestille seg. Vi bruker 2 millioner liter vann hver eneste døgn på sykehuset. Og det å være uten vann da kan vi jo tenke oss at må vi levere vann med lastebiler, det er jo da 4 til 5 lastebiler i timen, hele døgnet igjennom. Jeg tenker at det er en situasjon vi ikke helt kan forestille oss.
Hva slags beredskapstiltak har dere på Oslo universitetssykehus i forhold til for eksempel et angrep på kritisk vanninfrastruktur?
Med så høyt forbruk som vi har, så har vi tatt forhåndsregler. Men det er klart, det er fortsatt en sårbarhet. Der tror jeg vi har kommet litt kort, og der tror jeg vi må samhandle mye mer, både med læring fra krigene som pågår, og andre kritiske infrastrukturenheter som er i samme situasjon.
During the last winter, Ukraine experienced the most massive combined attacks on energy infrastructure. Large combined heat and power plants and water supply facilities were added to the target lists. Such strikes violate international humanitarian law and bear the characteristics of genocidal warfare.
Vi kan lære av Ukraina. Vi må lære av Ukraina. Dette er ikke en fremtid som kanskje kommer. Dette er en realitet som allerede er her. WASHinWar.
Yes, det var filmen. Da skal vi gå videre i programmet til panelsamtalen. Jeg hoppet jo over presentasjonen av meg selv i sted. Ingrid Rosendorf Joysæter er generalsekretær i Caritas Norge. Da vil jeg introdusere Natalia Jeremejeva, som skal både introdusere panelet vårt, og som også skal lede panelsamtalen. Nå rigges det litt her. Denne samtalen vil foregå på engelsk, for vi har også engelsktalende deltakere i panelet. Så vær så god, Natalia, scenen er din.
Right. Thank you, Ingrid. I do not have the possibility of going to the other side, so I will start from here. And while we're preparing the scene, I will use those few minutes to introduce our fantastic panelists to you. Well, I will start with myself, I believe. Natalia Jeremejeva is my name, and I'm a sociologist. And on my free time, I also lead another organization called Norwegian Ukrainian Advocacy Hub. And during the workday, I work as a Ukraine advisor at the Norwegian Confederation for Trade Unions, where I manage a program which is kind of similar to what Caritas does. And I believe that we all are important players in what is going on in Ukraine these days. And we have 4 fantastic panelists. The first one I would like to invite here has traveled all the way from Ukraine and works for Caritas Ukraina. This is Tatiana Yatsuk, the manager for WASH program in Caritas Ukraina. Tatiana, you can choose where you would like to sit. And together with Tatiana, we're going to have Siv Henningstad, a Norwegian author, nutritionist, and cultural communicator, known for her work on food culture, health, and sustainable living. But today, Siv, please take a seat. Today, Siv is extremely interesting for us because she is the author of the book called Impure Waters, about vulnerable consumers. We also have with us Kjetil Furuberg, a Norwegian expert and leader in the national water and wastewater sector. Kjetil serves as the head of water services at Norsk Vann, the interest organization for the water industry in Norway, where he promotes efficient, sustainable management of drinking water and sewage system across Norway. So the Norwegian perspective here. And finally, Andreas Fjeldsgaard, who is the Norwegian executive director, the executive director of Tax Justice Norge, a non-governmental organization working for greater tax transparency and fair global tax rules. And I believe now I have to move to the other side. And as you all see, we are extremely lucky to have 4 very different experts working in very different fields. And we have a unique opportunity to speak about water from truly a multidisciplinary perspective. And obviously, water is something we rarely think about because this is something taken for granted. We all saw it in the video. And apparently, from the entire panel here, it's only Tatiana and I who remember the situation when you can be without water. I remember my crazy childhood in the 90s in Ukraine, where we used to fill up the bathtubs in order, to flush the toilet, or going out, and hearing the sound of the truck coming, carrying water, the drinking water, which was turned off quite many times. But I believe, now the reality is much, much different because the country is at war. And my 16-year-old son cannot even imagine what it means not to have water in the tap. That's something completely unbelievable. These perspectives we will be talking about today. But before we start, and I know we have several stories to share, I would like just to have a quick round with all 4 of you, without thinking too much or without, analyzing. But you all come from 4 very different professional contexts. When you speak about water, what is it for you? Is it something stable or something vulnerable? Tetiana.
Thank you, Natalia. And first of all, thank you, dear panelists, dear audience, for this meeting. And it's a very pleasure to be here and discuss this very important topic, is water security. And to answer this question, I think that in a stable context, as in Norway, as you said, really this water, access to the water is very rural question, because it's something what we used every day, what is exist, and also this is what is invisible for people who get this every day and use this. But today, globally, if we will talk about this in a global context, we need to say that water is not anymore sustainable, and there are more nations and more regions without access to the water. And if we will back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Plan, goal number 6 is about providing sustainable access to water, because now all the world we in a phase when facing with growing water stress and with water insecurity. So I think the water context is what we will speak about the next years. Talking about the Ukrainian context, of course the water is very vulnerable. And why? Because water is something was disappear, and it's something was the first breaking down, and also access to the water is something what very hard to recover because of different a lot of reasons. So for us, as for humanitarian organization, as for Caritas, water is not just a service. Providing access to the water is just to back for people dignity, back to people the health, and like back for them possible to live in the territory and stay in safe zones.
Water is a basic human right, more
exactly.
or less. See, you come from a different context.
Yes.
But you wrote your book.
Yes.
With some premises and some ideas in mind. So apparently not everything in Norway functions so ideally since this book came out.
I thought so too. I have a little cabin outside Kongsvinger, Finnskogen. And I was trying to make this cabin more useful. So I wanted to have water in this cabin. So I asked a company to do that for me. And the result was I didn't have water to drink. So I take the whole case to the legal system. And I come to tingretten. And then I met a female, that's the most bad thing I think, female judge who said to me, see, you can water the flowers. And my little cabin is near a lake. So I have enough water. And that made me write this book about how important it is to have water and what we do when we not have water. I'm also a beekeeper, so I see what happens when we don't have water. It's also an effect also for animals.
So is it more of a stable or vulnerable factor in your case?
It's not stable. It's make us weak. It's make us insecure. And I think water is in Norway or in the whole world more or less invisible, as you say. And we have to take more action for water. And I think the government on every region, every part of every country have to have water supplies for every citizen in every public. Yeah.
Kjetil, this is what you do in your professional life.
Yeah, so water to me is something dynamic. It's always changing. It's marked by its origin or by its footprint, so to speak. So it will change when you subtract it from the water source, when you treat it, when you send out in the distribution system. There will always be danger and things you have to look after to be sure that you always deliver good drinking water all the time, because you cannot deliver bad drinking water 1 hour each month. Then the whole city could be sick. So this is not something which are stable. We are making it stable for the societies as we treat the water and we distribute it. But in its nature is, of course, something you have to be very aware of, because it's always risk connected to the path of the water. There's always be risk connected to that.
Risk is something we're going to take up later on. But Andreas,
yes,
you come from a completely different world.
Yes, in this context, I will take a different approach. I think it's very good reflections. But as you said, we work a lot on tax. But then you have to acknowledge that when you talk about tax systems, you really talk about all infrastructure, who owns it. You talk about all financial system. You talk about buying and selling infrastructure. All infrastructure is owned really by a company. We have water supply, especially in Norway, because it's regulated. It's not, but we don't really regulate hydroelectric plants and stuff. They are owned by companies. A lot of it is allowed to be owned from anywhere. All companies, it's not regulated. So when we come in, we work with tax systems and transparency. And in Norway, we don't really know who actually owns our critical infrastructure. And we have done a lot of analysis, and we see that at least 4 or 5%, maybe as much as 10% of our critical infrastructure, we don't really know who owns it. And as Ivan Fedorov said, we need to be prepared, because other states may want to break normal life, as you say. And if you have different people with different intentions, which we don't really know who they are, owning our critical infrastructure, I think we are not prepared as we should be. Yeah.
With this pessimistic note, let's try to see what was the starting point for.
We know who 90% is, so that's the positive note.
That's better. That's better than nothing.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's great.
But this is a peaceful country, right? And where we more or less know the context. But Tatiana comes from a completely different environment, and this project is a part of a completely different system. Yeah. And Ukraine is a country where water has been vulnerable for years and has become even more vulnerable during the wartime. So Tatiana, when we talk about water, what does it mean for you, for infrastructure, for the project you're conducting? If the water suddenly disappears, what does it mean for people and for the humanitarian efforts that so many actors conduct in Ukraine?
Thank you for these questions. It's really hard to find the right words for that, because when water disappears, it feels like life itself disappearing. And as Ingrid today has mentioned about this Kakhovka disaster, and this is the situation when life disappears from the lot of regions. In Kherson, in Zaporizhia, also, and not only, because water is just a part of the ecosystem. But water is not only about the infrastructure, and as I said, this water is also about the ability to continue the life and continue to live in a dignity and have a chance for the health. And as a humanitarian organization, we feel our responsibility is to provide access to the basic needs. So for first, of course, we try to cover these basic needs with access to the drinking water for affected people. But also, we understand that the crisis can be will not finish yesterday or in 1 hour. So we also help people become more capable to recover from very prolonged humanitarian crisis. And if we speak about Ukrainian, it's more than 4 years, a very huge humanitarian crisis. So as a humanitarian organization, we try to find the solutions that go beyond emergency aid and create long-term impact for locals who are affected. Of course, this is not an easy process, and in this sphere we try to find common solution with locals, with communities, with authorities, with national institutions. And of course, thanks to the support and close partnership from Caritas Norge, from supporting from NORAD, which makes this response more, in general, possible for us. And this is a very huge help for this to go through this humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Yeah.
So this experience you're describing, if we try to go from experience to the systems, Kjetil, I was thinking of you. When you hear what Tatiana is saying about the system that has been created with many different chains, if one of the parts gets broken or disappears or gets blown up for whatever reasons, what happens to the entire system?
Well, it depends on which parts, of course, are blown up. But in Norway, the large works and the medium size always have to have backup system. You have to have robust system which are able to handle failures at different levels with different contexts and different assets. But of course, there are some critical parts of it. So that's a huge job we are doing all the time to secure that if something fails, you will still deliver water. But that is in peacetime. When it comes to war times, I think it's a totally different level, and you have to and challenges, and you have to think much more about how you're able to restore your system, how to make them work afterwards, and of course you're able, which we're going to discuss afterwards, you have to have your power, you have to have your electricity system function, you have to have communication, and all that things which are interconnected and makes the system works on a system level. So it would stress the system enormous, it would stress the people working at the system, and it would stress the society, because we as water distributor must communicate with all of you, because if your water is not in the tap here in Oslo, you will start to ask does it come back in 10 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours? Is it safe? And so forth and so forth. So we have to also be very good at communication. So there are many challenges when it breaks down.
But since we have Andreas here, we probably would also ask, who owns it?
Yeah. Well,
I know this is something you like talking about. Would you just elaborate a little bit?
No, we have regulated some parts, water distribution and so on, but at least for hydroelectric plants and a lot of the electric, we don't really, we're open for any company to own it. We have a national tax system, we have a global economy. You can own really stocks in any company around the world today. Any of us can do that without any big trouble. And you can register a holding company in a tax haven in Luxembourg, have a lawyer's name, and a Russian oligarch or whoever can do that and really hide who is actually owning the Norwegian company. And it took Parliament in Norway made a resolution 10 years ago. We have to have a register of who is the actual, what we call beneficial owner. That means who's not just the company who owns the company who owns the company, but who's the actual physical person who owns the thing. And Parliament said that in Norway we need to have that information. That happened in 2015. And we got the actual register in 2025. So I don't think we have the necessary sort of attention to how this security threat also, if we don't know who owns our infrastructure. It took 10 years to implement the register. And if we think about Ukraine, we think, we can't use 10 years to implement this information and know who owns infrastructure in Norway.
And even in Ukraine, a country that has been in war for 8 years, the full-scale invasion became quite an unexpected thing. Steve, you are hearing these experiences, and you have heard what Tatiana is telling us about Norway, and you also you see more systemic approach from Kjetil and Andreas and your personal experiences with your cottage and how it felt. What are the things that are most difficult for us to be prepared for, to understand in this situation, to be more resilient, take into account the Ukrainian experiences and how we look at things here in Norway?
I think what he said earlier, I think the information, enough information to every part of the country, from school to every person, and having enough security when things are going wrong, who is going to take care of older people, sick people, also so forth. So I think information is a big thing. And the responsibility and organization, as they both said, how to organize things best and easy and efficient, and so it works in any case.
Tatiana, how do you use information as a factor in your project, and through your work in general? When you look at the entire project, this part of the chain we have mentioned. What is it breaking first? Usually. What is the most vulnerable part?
What is the most vulnerable? First of all, I want just to add information that war does not damage one chain, one link. It's a situation when it breaks all entire links. And it's very can be helpful to be prepared and to take together all institutions, humanitarian sectors, and civil society to prepare for that and bring these ideas, these capabilities from each sector, and create hubs or coordination centers where we can share the information very timely, and also bring maybe all brought together in one page and trying to find the best solutions. I have to say that in Ukraine we spent some time for that, and when war started, the civil society was the first key. It was the first mechanism who help people and who create all of these tools, all of these hubs, and this is the center of continue and trying to survive in this war. What breaks? What is most vulnerable? You asked about. I think this. I can share 3 points. First of all, this is the power supply. Without the power supply, water treatment system is shut down very quickly. Next one is logistics. Logistics and supply chains also very vulnerable in the war. And of course it's coordination. Here I totally agree with you that coordination and preparedness, this is the most important for and to be prepared for war. And without coordination, all what you do, what the different organization trying to do, it becomes fragmented, and this why not very good solutions for people.
No, thank you for this. I think these 3 points can be taken by us further, right, in our discussion. And the power supply, Kjetil, I'm looking at you and thinking, about the interdependency between energy and water. And you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of our most vulnerable challenges. Or assets that we need. Of course, in the water sector, there are demands that you should be able to deliver water without energy in the grid for a number of days, but that also is at the main water treatment plant and at your main pumping stations. But of course, there are some would have enormous effect in the more out in the distribution system where you have a smaller pumping station. They are maybe not fixed or suitable for emergency power, and you may not have that amount of emergency power aggregates. So I think it will have enormous consequences if the power is shut down for several days. But I think we will be able, at least the largest cities, will be able to supply water for in the main part of the system for many days. That's demand in the legislation, and I think the most are prepared. But when it goes 1 week, 2 weeks, then you have to have new supply of diesel, and all that kind of would be a logistic challenge, and you have to be able to get the things you need. So I think it would create huge, enormous problems, at least if it goes on for years and years. So therefore, I think the experience from Ukraine, when you have to establish hubs, because you cannot be sure that you have power supply, then you have to establish hubs for water. But also, we must not forget sanitation, because if you don't have water, you're not able to have sanitation. And you not have the pumping station you need to transport your wastewater. And that also are very large challenges. And when they did the risk analysis here in Oslo, that was also one of the main risks they identified, that it would create enormous problems, and you may have to evacuate the city. So, but they try to manage that also in the plans. But it's, I think you have to look. It would be an enormous challenge for the society as a whole on many different levels.
But thank you for reminding us about that. Tatiana, would you like to add anything about sanitation? WASH, right? The whole abbreviation is water, sanitation, and...
Yes, it's a humanitarian sector.
Yeah.
Water, water, sanitation, hygiene, and this is what we are providing. And yes, we have the emergency response when we try to provide this distribution of water, provide access to the drinking water, when we provide the hygiene and sanitation. It's sanitation. Not only for households, it's also for key institutions like hospitals. Yes, when we're trying to find the sustainable solutions, it's about restoring of the infrastructure, but not only, it's also it's trying to find new innovative solutions for communities, for cities. And in war, you don't have a time. You can't spend much time for planning. You have to do something very quickly. So it's better to be prepared before. At least to have the scenarios, to have to know, to understand which this communication challenge, logistics, etc.
Well, the video showed us that we at least know one of the threats with the Oslo University Hospital that can collapse, more or less, right, in a situation similar to what Tatiana is describing. Andreas, have you been looking at this kind of threats, or maybe any other examples? Because I'm thinking, well, that can be relevant for our discussion.
We have we have examples in Norway. We have 250 hydroelectric plants in Norway was owned by unknown people through a company registered in different tax havens. So when you say, are we prepared, if 250 hydroelectric plants suddenly stopped working because someone just wanted to turn them off, and they could do that because we own them, at least that would stop the normal sort of operations, and we would be in sort of more crisis. We have to have people there, capacity there, and stuff. So that's, just sort of things we would notice really quickly if that happened. And just to bring in a little bit more complexity, we have another threat which we don't talk a lot about. It's the digital infrastructure, which everything here runs on, all the plants, all the hospitals and everything. It's really controlled, if you say Microsoft and Google and a couple more, it's really controlled by 2, 3, 4 people in the world. It can be turned off. I don't know what would happen here if we turned off Microsoft and Mail and yeah. So we're really dependent on some systems that could be really fragile. Yeah.
So this is much more than just water.
But just much more of just water, but it's power supply, it's everything, and it's the bureaucracy, it's logistics. If you turn off a couple of systems, yeah.
And we're lucky that we have these different perspectives and can think about that. But I would like to pick up on the last point Tatiana made about coordination and also the role of civil society. Steve, I'm looking at you. I'm just thinking, you know, with your different experiences. I always thought that the civil society in Ukraine is very similar, or the way it functions, very similar to the way it functions in Norway. Instead of being a watchdog, like in some other countries, this is an important player supplementing the government and providing the services that are missing. I kind of, you know, see at the Norwegian civil society in the same way. What do you think in this situation we're describing, in this situation of vulnerability with water and with the entire system, you know, being at risk? What can be the role of information and civil society?
Well, I think it's very hard. I think it's very difficult. And I think many people, as I said before this show, many people in Norway have a cabin somewhere in the woods or in the mountains, but then most of them don't have water at that place. So you are vulnerable in Norway anyway, if you live in the city or live outside the city. So I think it's difficult, and I think we in Norway have to be more focused on the risk that we can be, as they all say here, we can also lose our water, we can lose our energy, so we can suddenly be like Ukraine and don't have energy and don't have water.
So Norwegians cannot hide in their cottages in case the war starts.
I see. If you talk about to be prepared, if you read on the internet, then at the last sentence so somewhere, if you don't have to stay at your flat or house, maybe you can ask a neighbor who have a cabin. I think that, okay, yeah. But the most people don't have water at the cabin, so it doesn't help.
Kjetil, do you have a cabin?
Yes, I have, without water, but but it's water prepared for our own groundwater well and that kind of things. But yeah,
better than mine.
Yeah, but I think you have to be aware of that. It's not a recommendation to go to your cabin in crisis, because the health capacity of the health services in those small communities may not be good enough, so it's not sustainable to have a lot of people going out in the woods without any ability to get them health service or so forth. So you have to be a little bit critical to that advice. But when it comes to preparedness, I think the preparedness which the society have with the advices to store water, to be prepared, is very important, because if there should be a total loss of water from the pipe system, it would take some time to be able to establish deliverance of drinking water outside the pipes with so-called emergency water. And if you have to do that, you have to prioritize hospitals, people which are ill, which are not able to get the water themselves. So I think you have to, so this preparedness that each and one of us have is very important. And also when it comes to important hospitals and other factories or any important infrastructure, owners have to be prepared with their own preparedness. Otherwise, it may be much more dramatic than it really has can be, because if you are prepared, we will manage, but if you are not, we will not. So I think the lessons learned from Ukraine is very important. That you have to, because the municipality in Norway are key to this preparedness planning. There has the responsibility to look at the different infrastructures, to get them come together, to discuss and to plan, and also with so I think it's ongoing process, but we have much to do because we are not really been planning for war times. We've been planning for peace times with some disturbances, not war times. So I think we have to learn from Ukraine when we are now starting to planning for a much more worse scenario. Yeah.
On the 5th year of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, we apparently should start thinking about the scenarios.
Yeah, but it's actually it's not so easy just to do it, because you have to think what are the real consequences, and are the institution willing to pay for that consequence and be prepared. Does Oslo University's hospital really want to use money to make their own well or borehole because they can? Do they want to do that? Who's going to pay? Is it the hospital, or is it the department, health department? So, and in a society like us, there are many different budgets and many different persons deciding, and it's not always they're not always able to talk together, sadly, which we are pointing at all the time. So I think sometimes there has to be an emergency or sense of crisis before things are moving fast, unfortunately. And I think it should be enough to look at Ukraine, and then we should be, and I think we should understand that we have to move fast. But still, I don't think that's kind of sense of crisis is really getting into different decision makers. I'm afraid not, in the public sector and so forth, because they have their money, they have the budget, are not able to get more money. So what should we do? Should we down prioritize something and do something else? It's not well. So I think it's need more stringent expectation from the ones decide to say you have to do that, you have to do that, you have to do that, and yeah, it's not coordinating well enough yet.
Not yet, but we're coming to decision makers. I know, Andreas. No. I know I'm also looking at you. Would you just comment on that? What would be, something to take up to decision makers?
Yeah, I was just picking up on that point, because the holistic view on the risk and the threats are not really clear in Norway, I think. When we try to discuss it with the government, and we have to when we talk about hidden ownership and threats to our infrastructure as part of the tax system, it's part of the financial system, then we have to have a meeting which involves Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Industry. We need to have the Ministry of Defense and the intelligence services and the security services, and then the tax authority. But then it's like, it's hard to get all those people in one room, and they're not really discussing the same thing, because I have my responsibility and you have yours and you have yours, and it's really hard to get these complex issues, because we're not set up for it. I have mine, you have yours, and so it's different budgets, it's different responsibilities, but this is a threat. It involves all of your 5 ministries and intelligence service, security services, and so on. So we need to have some sort of mindset, a little bit differently,
It would probably be nice to have them with us today, at least someone that we could ask these questions, but maybe next time.
But I think we are getting there. We are slowly moving that direction. And when it comes to water services, I would say that you must remember that water services is always on guard. It's a 24/7 service. If a pipe breaks, you have to be there to mend it. So the challenges for our sector, I think, is to move from that to a more wartime thinking and be aware of the new threats, on the cyber threats or other types of threats. How do you meet them? How do you manage this? And how do we get the drinking water and sanitation sector to be part of the municipality planning for preparedness, how to be a part of the region planning for preparedness, and to help to support other critical infrastructure, and also secure that we are also prioritized from other critical infrastructures like power supply and so on. So I think we have to move up that ladder to better to coordinate our preparedness work is the challenges, and also to be able in our mind to move to a wartime scenario, which I have of course just had to look at Ukraine and their experience, and we were able to cope with that. And then I think the next level we have to do, or we have to do it immediately, is of course to help Ukraine much more than we do, to move faster on that also, because it's
No, it's a very important point that help is not a one-way process. Help is always a two-way road, right? While we're helping Ukraine in this particular case and learning from Ukraine. But Tatiana, I wanted to turn to you again, and if you just think about the early experiences, and you know, we were joking a little bit about the cottages here, but jokes apart, many Ukrainians have moved out of the cities on the first days of full-scale invasion, exactly to the rural areas, and this is how thousands of them ended up in occupation, especially north of Kyiv. So these are like very, very real examples. But I was thinking about you, Tatiana, from early experiences. What have you learned, you know, through this project, or maybe what could you think of doing otherwise, you know, after you know, working with this, and maybe some kind of advice you could have given to Norway in this respect?
Thank you for the question. You know, in Ukraine we have a very different experience. And we made a lot of good decisions, but also not very good decisions. So this is what we can share, and maybe to not just repeat some scenarios what we already had in Ukraine. And what maybe I will say what we expect, what we understand and what we not understand in Ukrainian, in this humanitarian sector also. Like before we understand that war has direct and indirect consequences, but what we are not really, what wasn't really clear for us is this. We don't expect the impact be so wide. And because war is not only like infrastructure of access to the basic needs, it's also about the people, it's also about their psychological, it's well-being, it's also about the health, it's also about education, it's about the business, it's about farming, agriculture, all sphere what you can imagine. So it's not easy managed, all of that in the same time. But yes, in Ukraine, in different sphere, not only in WASH, but in other humanitarian sectors, we have a very hard but complete experience how to manage with all of that. Maybe a little bit go through your questions.
Well, time runs so fast that we are almost ready to open for questions from the audience. But before we do that, I will just ask you one final question, all of you, based on what we have discussed, right? And we have mentioned the decision makers. We still, you know, even though they're not so well coordinated, and they're not so well coordinated in Ukraine either. Just if you see different aspects. So that's not only a Norwegian problem. What would be something, you know, maybe some insights from our today's discussion you could have taken further and recommended your colleagues or yourselves to take further with the decision makers?
Be more prepared.
be more prepared.
Well, I think it's much better to plan in peacetime when you can see what's happening in other places and to be prepared than to try to mend it afterwards, because then it's probably would be chaotic. So it's better to start now. And one other question we haven't asked us is the chain of delivery, electronic components, for example. It comes from China and all over. So there are many problems which the critical infrastructure's owners, like waterworks and so on, are challenging or facing now and trying to find out how to handle that. So I think to be able to really grasp the scenarios, to really grasp the situation, and to be willing to do something about it, think it all the way through. That's something we are not yet there. So I think that will be one of the messages from here. You have to think it through, and you have to act on it before it gets very costly or too late.
Thank you, Andreas.
Yeah. And to build on that, I think we need to accept that the price of preparedness is actually pretty high. But it's much more expensive to not do it than actually be in a crisis. Then it will be expensive, and we will see how hard it is. But I think it's a low willingness to pay in Norway for the preparedness, and actually just understand, why does it cost so much? Well, now we are prepared. Well, the last 20, 30 years, we haven't needed the preparedness, so it's just a cost. So that, again, that mindset to take, we need to spend money on preparedness because it costs. And I think we need some sort of more coordinated mechanism, at least in the federal, maybe also in lower levels in government, but to say we have some sort of authority that can actually go across different departments and ministries and say, we have a higher threat level. And we need to be able to act on that, not be dependent on all the different departments and ministries agreeing. We need some sort of, at least, preparedness center that can actually say, this is the holistic threat, and we need to act in all these levels.
May I add something?
Of course. And if now you're looking back, right? Anything you would have recommended Ukrainian decision makers, or maybe Norwegian decision makers, while you have a chance?
I think the both, because I totally agree what was mentioned, but also it's to communicate honestly with people about the situation, how is it in real, and not make this crisis seems smaller than this are. Because always it's better to be prepared than then try to go through these consequences.
Go ahead.
I think we haven't forgot to discuss what we can make drinking water out of salt water.
All right. Well, we forgot, many things. We didn't have time for, but we just hope that the audience is going to be active enough to ask the questions that we didn't have time to ask. Kjetil, let your remark be the last one before we open the floor.
Yeah, I just want to comment on what's said here, that I think, from my perspective, the municipality has a lot of responsibility, and in the laws says you have to do that, you have to do that, you have to do that. But there is although we are a rich country, there's a certain amount of money or a certain amount of taxation the municipalities are willing to tax the people. So the question is, what should we not do? And that is something that the lawmakers or the parliament is not so eager to tell. They tell you what you have to do, but what you shouldn't do, they don't tell you. And therefore, but the laws are there, demands are there, and there is a system in place to check that you do that. So you have to do that anyhow. And then at a certain point, preparedness is then not prioritized because there are so much other things you have to do. Otherwise, you get fined, or you have to go to the court or something. But preparedness, who is finding you for not be prepared?
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
So I think you have to look also about how this, the demands or what this municipality should coordinate and deliver as services have to be looked at, because you have to prioritize something, but it's not done today.
Thank you. That was an important remark. And now it's time for our audience to step in and ask some questions if we have forgotten anything, and if there's anything you wonder about. Yes, we have a question here. And please also introduce yourself.
Hello, Torgeson here. How would we prepare in practical, like how should the municipality, like kommune, prepare for water and wastewater solutions pre-war, for example? Thank you.
Preparing at the municipal level.
Yeah.
I would open the floor to all of you who would like to contribute. Kjetil, since
I can start. There's a lot of demands in the legislation, so there are a lot done. It's about the ordinary supply, it's about alternative supply, it's about emergency supply if you can't deliver your water through the pipe system, and you can also allow to deliver what we call crisis water, which are water with not drinking water quality, but you have to deliver it through the pipe system because of firefighting, sanitation, and so on. Then you have to, of course, alert the people through SMS messages and so on. So there's a lot in place. I think the preparedness is quite good, actually. I have to say that, because, as I said earlier on, we have been a sector which has to act when something fails, because you cannot be without water for an hour. It's not sustainable. So there are always been a type of organization that act very fast, but the problem is today that you have to move to a more holistic view on the society as a whole, and that we are a critical sector, and if someone are try to harm us in any way deliberately, we are maybe not prepared for handling that in a way we should. I think that's the main challenge.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else who would like to? Tatiana, would you like to speak about the municipal level in Ukraine, maybe?
Maybe.
Or anything else, because you had the question.
Yes, answering this question, we in Ukraine, we are trying to find solution in decentralization, because now decentralization for Ukraine and support communities, support different areas, municipalities. Mm-hmm. Yes, in municipalities in Ukraine's communities, it's security. It's about their security. It's about a chance for them for sustainability, and not be dependent of the big, not to be dependent of the missile attacks or drone attacks for the infrastructure. And now even now our authorities, I saw it in the news last night, that our authorities and securities, they really worrying about this increasing trees to water supply for the next months. And a few weeks ago, we met with some ministries, and we discussed on how we can provide this decentralized support, decentralized water supply, wastewater, etc., management for locals. So, yeah.
That's a very important point. The reform of decentralization was one of the most successful reforms in Ukrainian history, starting in 2014-15 and showing the results now during the wartime, even though many say that the decentralization process has been reversed. So, but this is, we see already how it plays both in Norway and Ukraine. Right. Shall we move on? We have a question, as a matter of fact, on YouTube.
Yes. Yeah, someone watching online, Andrea, is asking, how frequently do we actually experience hacker attacks on critical water infrastructure?
That's a very important question.
Well, all the time. All the time. It's, if you have a system like this dam you looked, which are not prepped properly, a shield from attacks, the system is not in place, then you will always look for vulnerabilities. If they do it just to earn money like that, then you will try to lock down the system and demand money. But if you are a much more advanced player, you will put something in the system, and you will don't say that you've been there or tell anyone, and then you can use that vulnerability later on if it's interesting. So there are always systems looking all the time for vulnerabilities in your digital systems, looking for backdoors, looking for things. So all the time, but the question is, when do they have success? And that's, well, we see that there's a lot of talk about crypto lockers and kind of thing that makes you have to pay for to open your system and so on in the private sector. So I don't think water is that much of interest, because water is public owned in Norway. We don't have that much money. But in the private sector, that of course is maybe more a problem. But we are a critical infrastructure, so it could be interesting to attack us later on if we are vulnerable today. So, yeah, all the time.
Jana, do we know about any hacker attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure connected to water?
Yes, we had this type of attacks, and also attacks for the infrastructure, especially for water infrastructure, starts not this last few months. It starts with the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So, for example, last on the beginning of the March 6th. The hydroelectric station on the Dniester River in the border with Moldova was attacked and destroyed. And this is also, it wasn't the first time. First time was in 2022. Then in 2024, and our authorities, they said that water has no borders. So, and now unfortunately we have to manage with these consequences, not only for Ukraine, but also for Moldova, as we know. So, yeah.
That's a very important point, because it shows the interconnectedness of different countries and contexts. Siv, Andreas, would you like to?
No, it's okay.
No, not yet, not yet. Do we have any more questions from the audience? No, the audience is thinking. I know the topic is quite complicated, taken for granted by many, but we still haven't named all the threats and all the inconsistencies. Andreas, I'm looking at you. I'm just thinking, you've brought this ownership thing as a very unique perspective to this discussion. Any other threats you're thinking about or you're working with that should be taken into account?
Well, that is the main point maybe we're working on, is the secrecy, financial secrecy and ownership, and how kind of threat that is. But connected to this, if you don't know who owns stuff, you don't know really who's behind transactions, then you don't know really who's the businesses that are supporting our political parties. We don't really know who actually owns the companies always that donates money to our political parties and funds the think tanks that actually are doing a lot of the political work. And of course it's corruption when you don't really know who's dealing with who. And as the security services and intelligence services is warning about, this is financial crime. Is really also sort of a way of doing hybrid warfare stuff. And the system today is you don't really know who owns the companies, you don't really know where the money is coming from a lot of the time. Norway is not the worst country in the world by far. It's all countries have these problems, but we haven't been really good in Norway to be up to level and have the information and the security of the systems we need. We have been very sort of the tax authorities and a lot of authorities in Norway say we are very obsessed with making efficient digital systems. It should be easy. It should be accessible at all time. But of course, all other intelligence services from other countries, they have also access then. And it's easy to do, more easy in Norway to do financial crime and stuff because we have the open access system, which is built on trust. We have really high trust in Norway, which is really valuable. It makes businesses go well and everything, but it's of course, it's possible to take advantage of the high trust and the easy access systems we really have, and yeah. So that is some of the other threats that goes into sort of a hybrid warfare thinking, yeah. Mm.
And again, the problem is much more complicated than we initially stated.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Was it a hand or? Yeah, lovely.
Hans, Siv, you mentioned salt water. So I just got very curious. Is desalination a possible solution, or is it too costly?
More companies, as you maybe know, are working with that problem or that solution to make more water for everyone in the world. So many companies all over the world, also in Norway, are developing systems to make drinking water out of salty water.
Yes,
Certainly,
I
of
can
course.
just comment on that, because that is, of course, a solution if you have areas near to the sea, to see salt water, if you have a lot of maybe solar power, so you can have off-grid or distributed systems. But you must remember that it's costly. It costs a lot of, you have to use a lot of pressure to pressurize these membranes to remove the salt. So it's a solution for drinking water, yeah, but it's maybe not for agriculture use. It's not for inland, because then you have to pump the water quite a long way. So there are, this is not a solution which solve everything. It can address some of the problems. When it comes to warfare situation, it's a complex system. It's as complex as any other water treatment system. So if you want to have a large or water treatment facility with huge capacity to serve a large city, then it's yeah, it could be, it's dependent on of course, power, and it could be hit by something and it's out of order. So, yeah. Mm.
Very important. Yes, Sergej.
Sergej Zamulka, the Ukrainian foreign in Norge. So you come to a really interesting question close to science. And now I have a question to you as material scientist. What is the status of water research in Norway? We know Norway invests a lot in solar cell energies. And it's because everyone knows that if no grid or no electricity in your plug or in your grid, you don't have possibility to charge device and so on. Now, and we see high demand on this. But what Norway doing for study water, especially like make it the salty? It doesn't work. Totally agree with you. But maybe we need to. What is the status of projects for this?
Well, it's an interesting question because I'm not personally involved in that. I don't have very accurate knowledge, but I have seen information about a new facility which you can lower down on the ocean bed. If you do that in 50 to 100 meter depth, then you can use the pressurized pressure from the water above to press the salt water through your membranes without using very much power. And then but you have to pump then the fresh water you have produced from the installation on the seabed up to your city, of course. This is systems which are been testing out on the west of Norway now. And of course, all the oil installations in Norway use this kind of desalination techniques, and all the boats around the world use the same technique. But the question or the problem is the energy demand. But if they are succeeding with having installation on the seabed using that technique, then you can lower the energy demand quite much. So yes, I think it's a future there. Yeah.
A little bit change question in this case. Do you think Norway doing enough in case of study of water, or they need to make more efforts? This will be how many programs Norway has for study problem of different kind of studies water. I'm not talking about sea life. I know Norway doing a lot for study sea life. I'm talking especially study water.
We don't have that kind of research programs, and I think that's a little bit. I'm not very. I think that's a big challenge that we do not have research program, especially looking at drinking water or water treatment at all, because that's a municipality. The municipality has to solve that kind of problems, and it's also what you call is only have to use the money you take in from the taxpayers when it comes to water taxation has to be used to produce and deliver the service, not to any other tasks. So therefore, it's not so much money in Norway to do research on water treatment and also sanitation. So I think that's a huge problem. And you talked about different kind of department, different kind of responsibility. And there's also a problem in Norway, because when you ask the science, also Forskningsrådet, the National Research Council, thank you. Where do they get the money from? From something, from a department. And when the responsibility is scattered through many departments, we don't have this research program for water and wastewater, and that's a huge problem. So my answer is there are some research centers like in Trondheim, Sintef, and so on, doing quite much and doing it quite well, but it should be much more. So it's a systematic challenge.
We started being very technical, and then came to the question of research, which is extremely important. Tell me, if I may just ask you very briefly, do you use research in your work in Ukraine?
Of course, we are using research for humanitarian situation. Also, we are using research for innovation, technical innovation in Ukraine, and not only, also in other countries. During the war, a lot of change in science, in humanitarian sector, in how this management and businesses, etc. So researching and updating information and trying to find new solutions more suitable for new awareness is very important. Not only during the war, but during the wartime, extremely important.
And maybe also a possibility for exchange and learning from each other.
Yeah,
we have another question on our YouTube channel.
Yes. So someone is asking, is it true that no government ministry is fully responsible for the water security preparedness? And does this responsibility fall between the cracks? And if so, why is that?
We started talking about that.
Well, yes, the health department has that responsibility. So that's and they're working quite well with that. But of course, due to the interdependencies, it's difficult to coordinate everything, because we are dependent on power, communication, and all that interdependencies. That's the challenge, I think. But but on wastewater, it's another department. It's the environment department, and when it comes to coordination between sectors, it's another department. When it comes to finance, it's someone else. So, and it goes on. So,
Tatiana, would you like just to comment about Ukraine?
A very common situation, because it's also like responsibility for health ministry. But I just want to share that it's these different stakeholders. It's not only disadvantages. It's also we have to use this like well-known stakeholders in different sectors, and just to make this communication more clear and understand what who can provide what type of support. So yes, just coordination, changing of information, and build a strategy for different scenarios.
No, but we're getting to the end of our session, and the very last chance of asking a question is here. No, then we will try to wrap up a little bit, and I would like to ask all of you one very important question that was slightly mentioned throughout the discussion, and this is about the information, and this is about having the population informed about the challenges and solutions. Do you have any reflections on that? And obviously, I bet Ukraine has a lot to share here. Mm-hmm. Who would like to start?
I can start. I think that we, in different stakeholders, we have to clearly communicate about the risks and communicate about the water, because water is not only the resource. Yes, it's a very life-saving resource. And we need to communicate about that on a different stage, since kindergarten, since our daily routine, and create this attitude, trying to save water, trying to save environmental in general, and be more strong in our position to protect our resources.
Thank you, Tatiana.
I think, as they both said, the government have to take more responsibility. But if all the citizens, all the people in some country are sick, we can't do anything. So I think the government have to use more money to make us safe water.
All right. Kjetil?
Well, I think it's about preparedness in every dimension of the society in real. So it's the combined preparedness effort which will give us a safe and secure society, even if you are under pressure. I don't think, because it's so interdependent, everything. So it's like if I'm working in water and doing operational tasks at a waterwork, and my wife is working as a doctor, for example. She has to go fix something. Maybe I have to take care of the children. So there are always interdependence, and you have to plan for that. And you have to look at your personnel, you have to look at your resources, you have to look at your own private preparedness. So if you should be able to meet such a challenge as you have done in Ukraine, you have to acknowledge that and do our own preparedness in every layer and organization in society. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, thank you. Andreas?
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of good input. I think, at least for now, Norway's on sort of a scale. Do we want people to be super prepared, nervous, and scared at all time, and then be really good prepared, or do we want people to have as normal life as possible? And maybe have too much trust, and maybe even a little bit naive. I think we are probably a lot on the naive trust side now. But I don't think we want a society that goes around and being super scared and super prepared at all times. So I think we need to find that balance also, because government could say any day, war is coming, maybe today, maybe today. I don't think that would be good. That's not the best. But we need to, again, stay calm, maybe move a little bit from the trust, a little bit more control and sanctions, and be prepared. But keep the balance at least, because a good society, I think, still is where life is pretty normal. That's a good preparedness. And then, of course, prepare for what we don't know yet. But
and that's what we see in Ukraine, when society wants to live, or people want to live their lives as normal as possible. Kjetil, the very last word.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be that complicated either. Ask yourself, if you're without water 5 days, there's no water in the tap for 5 days, what do you do? If you can't use your mobile phone, what do you do? If it's no power in the grid, what do you do? That's quite simple questions. But the solution isn't simple, but yeah.
We haven't come up with any solution for you, but I can guarantee that this is the first panel that hasn't taken water for granted. And we have managed to cover pretty many different topics. We haven't spoken about agriculture in depth. We haven't spoken about the nuclear power plants and how water is used for cooling down the system. We haven't spoken about many threats, but at the same time, we have tried to offer you a multidisciplinary discussion that water is not a simple thing. So thank you once again. Let's give a warm round of applause to this panel. And now back to you, Ingrid.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this very interesting conversation. At least I am wiser. I hope you are too. I think some of the things you said and also the video took me back to the first time I visited Ukraine some years back. And I visited a place called Krig. And there was a hospital there covering the whole area. And there was no water because of the water dam being bombed. And the water was polluted. And this Caritas project bored more water holes and also had kind of some new water system there for the hospital. But it was one tap for the hospital with good water, good quality water, but it was one tap for medical purposes, for water to have in your tea during working hours, and also for the communities, neighboring communities coming there to collect drinking water from this one tap in a quite large area. This was in 2024. So in 2024 in Europe, this was kind of the daily life and the struggle of how to actually to access clean water. That was one of the things I was thinking about while you were talking. I would like to thank you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for moderating. We have some small gifts. I will give them, and we can give applause when I do that. Thank you, Natalia.
While she's distributing the gifts, I want to say, outside there is a perfectly waterwork, a high technology waterwork in a container. It's a small but efficient. Go outside after you're finished here, talk to the personnel out there, and look at a real waterwork and a treatment plant, and it's very interesting. So that if you have a lack of water, you can just call these people, and you have that in your backyard.
Thank you so much. Vi er ikke ferdige ennå, for det er jo en fotoutstilling. Og da vil jeg bare minne folk om at 2026 er totalberedskapsåret. Caritas er ikke en beredskapsorganisasjon. Vårt bidrag, for alle må bidra i det, er å bringe lærdom og kunnskap fra Ukraina til Norge. Nå er det utstilling. Utstillingen er satt opp her ute i gangen. Vi deler oss inn i 3 grupper. Dere går til en av de 3 som nå stiller seg opp forskjellige steder. Det Olja, det Tatjana og det Alexander. Og så kan man enten begynne der, eller man kan gå ut og begynne med vannrenseanlegget som utenfor. Scanwater her, har renset vann fra Akerselven. De sier det helt trygt, og det det også, for det har vært renset. Og dette ganske likt det vannrensesystemet som også Caritas Ukraina bruker i frontnære områder i Ukraina. Så bli med på guidet tur i utstillingen, og takk for at dere kom i dag.